Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Today what we're going to do is we're going to release the legions. Well, at least we're going to release the books on the legions of Rome. So we're going to do a video on the legions of Rome. This is a topic that I really hold near and dear to my heart. I love ancient history in particular, or in general, I should say, and I love ancient Roman history in particular, and especially love the history of the legions. And when you're talking about ancient Rome, the development of the legions actually mirrors the development of the empire. When the legions were at their height, the empire was at its height. When the legions were starting to decline in organization and training, the empire was in decline. And so by tracing the legions, you can actually trace the Roman progress of the Roman Empire as well. And I've got 3 books that cover the Roman legions very well. These 3 books taken together make an excellent library of information on the legions. And we're talking here about the legions at the height of the empire. So this is going to be about 200 AD, after the reforms of Gaius Marius that happened at about 100 BC. And again, this is Rome at its height. And if you've seen any of my other reviews, my videos on reference books, you'll know that the likelihood of finding, at least in my opinion, the likelihood of finding a single reference book that's going to do everything that you want, have all the textual information in the diagrams and maps and illustrations that you're looking for on all the topics you're looking for, is about as likely as finding a unicorn out your front door. And that's why, that's why I have these 3 books here, because these 3 books as a compendium, as a triumvirate, if you will, just make an excellent reference for the legions of Rome. So let's get to it. What's the first book in the triumvirate? And the first book is The Roman Army, the Legendary Soldiers Who Created an Empire by D.N. Blacklock. Here it is. It's a large format book, very large format. It's a very narrow book. It's a very thin book. It's only 48 pages long. And the reason it's only 48 pages long is because it's a young adult book. And before you start getting on me, let me explain. So young adult books can actually be excellent reference material. And if you guys are familiar with the TV game show Jeopardy with Ken Jennings and Alex Trebek, a lot of the biggest winners on Jeopardy, they would study for Jeopardy by going into libraries, and they would go into the young adult section and they would go through all the young adult reference books, because those books are just packed with solid information, the core information, with no fluff. They're very succinct, they're very to the point. And this book here certainly is. And it covers a wide variety, a surprisingly wide variety of topics for only 48 pages in a very good detail and very well written manner. But that's not why I have it. I have it for the freaking artwork. The artwork in this book is outstanding. It is just wonderful, and it's by David Kennett. So David Kennett does the artwork in this book. It's a large format young adult book, and because it's a large format young adult, the pages are just filled with art. They're mostly artwork, and his art style is just wonderful, particularly for portraying the armies of Rome, the legions of Rome. And it almost has sort of a Mike Mignola feel to it, his art style, and it works very well with the legions of Rome. So here you've got a big cover page with the general leading the legions into battle, presumably. And then on the interior cover, you have the enemies of Rome. And then to introduce the book, here's what David Kennett does. And I think this is just wonderful of him. He starts with the emperor. I like to think of this as Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus Aurelius in his royal purple, his imperial purple, sitting on the throne. He's got his 2 pet cheetahs next to him from his African provinces, and he's pondering what to do. Then on the next page, he gets up and he's walking down the hallway, and you're looking at him from above. He's got his long imperial purple cape flowing out behind him. His 2 long lanky cheetahs are flanking him as they go down the long hallway. And then he arrives at the war room, which has this giant mosaic of the Empire of Rome at its height at their feet. And this is just brilliant. This is David Kennett's solution to taking what otherwise would have just been a boring map showing you what the extent of the Roman Empire was, with this dull, uninteresting map, and he's turned it into this narrative story, ending with the emperor here with his 2 cheetahs at his feet, with the burning braziers and his generals around a mosaic and the strategy in the war room, plotting strategy over the a map of the empire and its provinces. And it's just genius. And it's gorgeous to boot. Look at that artwork. It's fantastic. And that artwork just continues throughout the book. Next page, the army in the camps. And then you've got all the individual soldiers of Rome. Again, this is Rome at its height, about 200 AD. And I just love his style. His style, even though it's less realistic, it's not based as a realism style, it gives the soldiers a life and an energy that a lot of the books that have a more realistic style of painting just fail to achieve. And I'll show you guys an example of that when I get done with the last book. I'll go back and compare some more realistic styles and some of the other books to Dave Kennett's here. These soldiers, they just have a weight, an energy, and a life to them that doesn't come through in most of these other books on Rome. And I love it. So here you have the Roman soldier on the march. Here you have the Roman cavalry units. And look at the action in there. You get this action and this energy and this gravity that just really comes through with his art style. The Roman soldier at war with his war gear. And then you've got the legions in battle. So here are the legions assembled with all their war machines, and the centurion here crying out to his cohort, you know what's coming, you know it's coming. He's crying out, release the legion. And then on the next page, you get this great battle scene. And again, look at that art. It's just fantastic. It's a Roman legion. You got the general in the center there, which might be a little unlikely, fighting a troop of either Gauls or Celts. And I just love it. And look at the back page on here. Again, you've got this fantastic artwork in this large format. And check out the face on this Roman centurion. He's being forced on a training march in the middle of winter through the snow for miles and miles. And you just got this grit and determination that comes through there that you don't get in a lot of the more traditional books. And that's why this book by D.M. Blacklock, The Roman Army, The Legendary Soldiers Who Created an Empire, is book number 1 in the Triumvirate. So if that's book number 1, if that's the bling and that's the eye candy, then here, book number 2, The Legions of Rome, this is the meat and potatoes. This is where you're getting your core dense information. And this is just a fantastic book by Stephen Dando Collins. The Legions of Rome, the definitive history of every imperial legion. And that's exactly what this is. It's the definitive history of every single imperial legion. And this book is organized into 3 chapters, or 3 sections, I should say. And the first section is on the men of the legion. And it just gives you a breakout of how legions were organized, the history of the legions, how they were put together, all the different units that were in it, and their daily life, and the living conditions that they were subjected to in the legions. So it gives you sort of an introduction to the legions. And then section number 2 is the history of the of the individual legions themselves. And that's section 2, where it goes through all of the legions. And then section 3 is the battles, and it covers every major engagement by every imperial legion is here in this book. There are 75 battles that it outlines in a very succinct but very detailed in a very readable and enjoyable manner, and it's unbelievable. It's just fantastic stuff. So let me give you an example of how he chose the information for each individual legion. So this is in the second section on the legions, and this is for the 2nd Augusta Legion. So right there you get the 2nd Augusta. That's its introduction page. Let me put on my cheaters, and I'll just read you what it gives you. So the 2nd Augusta, or Legio II Augustus, it shows you their emblem, their shield with their emblem on it. It gives you their birth sign, their foundation, the recruitment area, their postings, their battle honors, and famous commanders. And then it goes into a text history of the legion with a lot of information included in it. And it does that for every single imperial legion. And you've got a nice color splash page in here as well that shows you all of the shields of every legion with all their emblems. So there's one. You've got a double splash page here of the shields with the emblems. And then you've got one more page of shields and emblems that also includes the special units, the Praetorian Guard, the cavalry, the Imperial Cavalry, and the German Guard. And then it follows that up with the 75 battles. And the battles in here, it's fantastic information because not only does it have all the famous battles, but it's got all these other engagements that you might not know about if you didn't have this book. And one of those is the battle with Queen Boudicca in Roman Britain. And almost everybody has heard of Queen Boudicca, but not everybody has heard about the battle that destroyed her. In this story, this battle, it's fantastic. It's got heroes, it's got villains, it's got intrigue, it's got miraculous battle outcomes that just save all kinds of people. It's just a fantastic story that actually should be made into a movie. It would make a fantastic movie. But Catus, the Roman financial advisor, reed tax collector in Roman Britain, takes the emperor's orders a little too literally, and he sends his slaves out into the countryside to rape and pillage as much wealth from the Britons as he can. And during this campaign of rapine and pillage, he rapes the daughters of Queen Boudicca, and he plunders all of her land from her and her tribesmen, who are the Iceni tribesmen, the Celtic tribesmen in the central area of Britain. This incenses Queen Boudicca, and she gets the Druids together, and they inflame the countryside into a religious revolt against the Roman soldiers. And they gather 100,000 Celts, and they descend on the Roman city of Cantilundum, and they just destroy it. They kill every human being in the city, which is tens of thousands. And after destroying this city, more Celtic tribes join them, and their army swells to almost 250,000, and they are purging every Roman town off the face of Britain. Catus, being the hero, not that he is, being the villain, he takes all of his stuff, he gets all of his slaves, he puts them on a boat, and he sails his booty and his slaves over the ocean, over the English Channel to Gaul, and he flees. And he leaves Rome and the Roman citizens to their own devices after having stirred up this religious revolt that's now trying to genocidally purge the Romans from Britain. And caught in this is the Roman general Paulinus. Paulinus is leading the 14th Gemina, and he only has 10,000 Roman legionnaires from the 14th Gemina with him. And he's desperately trying to stay ahead of this rampaging horde of Queen Boudicca's. And he's moving north, and he's collecting as many Roman citizens as he can, driving them north to try to keep them safe from this horde that's trying to slaughter them all. And he's going northward, he's being pursued, and he gets to a point where he can no longer go any farther north, or he's going to get up to the northern border and develop different problems. So he turns his army, his 10,000 ragtag men, and he forms them into 3 wedge formations in ground that he thinks is good defensible ground. And he awaits the coming of the horde. And then the horde arrives, and as the horde is forming, he launches his 3 wedge formations into the horde, and they fight, having trouble talking tonight. They fight, quote unquote, for a very long time. But eventually the Roman training, arms and armor, discipline, and formations prevail, and they break the Celts apart. And the Celts begin to flee. But they hit their baggage train, which has come to watch a Roman slaughter. And as they run into it, they become entangled in the baggage train, at which point General Paulinus cries out, "You know it's coming, you know it's coming." He cries out, "Release the legion!" And the Roman soldiers crash into them, and they slaughter 80,000 Celts to make up for the estimated 80,000 Romans that Queen Boudicca has killed up to this point. And it breaks the revolt forever and solidifies Roman Britain. And it's a fantastic story. And if you didn't have it, this book right here, The Legions of Rome, you might not know it. It's just a wonderful story. And there's 74 more battles just like it in that book. It's the largest battle to ever take place on British soil. It doesn't even have a name. There's no name for this battle. They think it took place around Warwickshire, and that it took place along Wattle Street. They think Queen Boudicca's army came up Wattle Street in Warwickshire, but nobody really knows. And for that reason, it's not that well known of a battle, but you've got it here in this book. So that's book number 2. It's a fantastic book. I can't recommend it highly enough. But that leaves the last one in the triumvirate, which is Legionary, the Roman Soldier's Unofficial Manual by Philip Matisak. I think that's how you say that. This is a nice little book, a nice little tome. It's an excellently made book, physically made. Very nice cover, great binding. The page quality is superior, and it's 200 pages of tongue-in-cheek advice for a new Roman recruit coming into the Roman Legion about what you can expect for life in the Roman Legion and how to be a Roman legionnaire. And it takes you from the initial recruitment right up through onto retirement from the Roman army, including such subjects as alternative military careers, legionary kit and equipment, training discipline in the ranks, and people who will want to kill you. And despite its tongue-in-cheek nature, it's packed with great information. With just great information, it's super well organized and presented, and because it is a little tongue-in-cheek, it's a pleasure to read as well while you get your education. So let me give you just a quick sample of some of the tongue-in-cheekness of this book. So this is telling the new Roman recruit about the different people who want to kill him, and it's talking about the Roman barbarians, and this is sort of a summary of that chapter at the end. Again, I got to get my cheaters. So notes on the German barbarians. 1, avoid bogs and forests. This basically involves staying out of Germania. 2, the most ferocious part of a German attack is over in 4 minutes. The trick is to still be alive after 5 minutes. 3, if you can avoid fighting the Germans for long enough, they will fight each other instead. 4, the same generals who affect to despise the Germans as soldiers leap at the chance to hire them as mercenaries. And that's just sort of a flavor of the book. And it also has a ton of quotes in it from actual German soldiers, or pardon me, not German soldiers, Roman soldiers and Roman generals that provide little insights on Roman outlooks on their enemies and everyday life in the Roman army. And here's one on the German barbarians. So this is Velius Paterculus in the History of Rome. And Mr. Paterculus says, the Germans, who combine immense ferocity with a degree of cunning that seems incredible to someone who has no experience with this race of born liars. And that's just a great little quote. And this thing is just packed with these little quotes. And it's just dense, it's information dense in a very enjoyable format. And that's why it rounds out my triumvirate of the 3 Roman Legion reference books that are in my library that I like the best. Now, there are thousands and thousands of books on Rome and the Roman legions, and no one person could read them all. But of the ones that I've seen, these are the ones that I think make a very solid collection of reference material. And if you were to collect these 3 and digest them and retain all the information in it, it might not make you a professor of the Roman legions, but it might get you to a grad student level. It's got that much information in here. But I mentioned that I wanted to show you an additional book, a more realistic art style for depicting Roman soldiers and their enemies, and compare it with that book by D.M. Blacklock. So here you've got an illustrated encyclopedia of the uniforms of the Roman world. It's got the Roman soldiers from the start of Rome all the way to the height and then the decline, and their enemies. And it's a good book, it's a solid book, and you can see sort of the more realistic style for depicting the Roman soldiers and the people that they would have encountered on campaigns. And I'll show you some of the interior art so you can take a look at it. So here are the Roman army of the Punic Wars. So this is early Roman army. And again, you can see that realistic style, and it's well done. There's nothing wrong with it. It's very historically accurate, but it's dull and lifeless. It's just dull. There's no activity to it. There's no life to it. It doesn't bring them out and bring them into any type of action or give you any feel for them. They're just sort of flat and on the page, even though it's a more realistic style than Mr. David Kennett's style in this book on the Roman army, which is just fantastic. I love it. It's like a graphic novel that just brings them out and gives you that energy, the grit, puts you there with the emotion, and gives them some gravitas that you just don't get in some of the more traditional books. And again, that's why I like this book so much, even though it's a young adult book. But that's it. If you guys got books that you like on the Roman armies, I would love to hear about it. Put it down in the comment section below. And other than that, I think I've talked long enough about the Roman armies and the Roman legions. So with that, take care, be safe, and I'll catch you all in the future.